All right, Fresh, let's get to our number one team in the country. Back-to-back national champions. Obviously, they have to come in at number one, and that would be the Georgia Bulldogs. It is very impressive what Kirby Smart has been able to put together for Georgia. The question's going to come by, like, there's some pieces that are starting to leave here. Yes, Georgia is recruiting at an elite level. They are a factory of NFL talent. They are producing a bevy of first-round draft picks, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that are littered all through the NFL and will be playing on Sunday. That alone is one of the best recruiting pitches. I don't care about your NIL deal. I don't care about my $100,000 NIL deal that pays me out over 3 years or what have you. What I care about is that first-round NFL contract and that signing bonus. Plus, on top of that, I'm going to wind up getting that NFL pension. Who cares about NIL deal when I got that type of talent? There are some questions there at Georgia. I do have some questions going into this year, but Fresh, I'm looking at this Georgia schedule here. We're getting on Michigan there. There's a couple of them. Like South Carolina plays Georgia tough every single year. I know everyone's going to say good old-fashioned hate September 30th at Jordan-Hare against Auburn, but as I said earlier with Alabama, I don't think much of Hugh Freeze in Alabama. This, for the Bulldogs, the season starts at the cocktail party for me. If Georgia is not 6-0 going into the cocktail party, someone please check on Fresh. He's a nice guy. Make sure you call him if there's a reason Georgia's not 6-0 at that point. Please make sure he is safe and well cared for at this moment. But they should be by all intents and purposes. But really, the question comes down to Carson Beck, man. He looks the part. He should be the next great Georgia quarterback. I think the biggest loss for Georgia is going to be Todd Monken. That's me. And I'm going to tell you this here, Fresh. I'm going to use the comparison in 2014 when Ohio State wins the national title. The biggest loss they didn't really lose anybody on that team. What they lost was Tom Herman as the offensive coordinator. And you started not a major change in offensive philosophy, but you started to see little things that were different, that weren't done the same way that Urban was kind of changing on the fly. You still had Ezekiel Elliott. You still had Cardell Jones. You still had Michael Thomas. You had this really great team there, but something just seemed different. I'm curious to see what Monken does there. But again, you're talking about a team that, listen, if anyone wants to be crazy and say that Brock Bowers isn't the best tight end in college football, I don't know what you've been watching for the last 2 years. The dude's a monster. That is one of the best receiving tight ends. He may be one of the best receiving tight end prospects to come out in the last 10 years. You have things with Georgia that you're going to have every single year. Georgia is a running back factory. There's guys by the name of Todd Gurley, Nicholas Jamal Chubb, Sony Michel. I'm sure there's other ones that Fresh is going to say, oh, yeah, you forgot about this guy and that guy and what have you. Georgia produces great running backs. You got a guy by the name of Kenny McIntosh, who is an absolute monster at 6'1", 210. He got drafted into NFL. I'm thinking of Dejon Edwards here, Fresh. That's the second time I've done this. And, oof, boy, howdy. And Kendall Milton. Kendall Milton's the other one coming back there. So I knew I had to get him straight there for a second. But both of those guys are absolute monsters there. And, oh, yeah, they got some other cats coming in. Fresh, I'm looking for a weakness for Georgia. I really am. And I don't see it. This is a team that's loaded. They're going to be in the conversation from day one. They're going to be in the conversation. There's only 3 games that I even think. Again, weird things happen in Jacksonville, but Kirby Smart's kind of ended that whole charade there. Ole Miss has some talent. Not enough maybe to beat Georgia, but maybe to make it a little uncomfortable. But that game's in Athens. And Tennessee. And the only reason why I would say Tennessee is because the game's in Knoxville. And that's it. I don't know. You tell me, Fresh. You see a weakness on this team because I'm really searching. I do have one last little tidbit, but I'll wait for that one.
Well, first off, how about them dogs back to back? These are the good times. These are the happy times right now. We all just keep cherish the moment is what we're trying to look at here. And some of us never thought this might would happen for a while, and now we're here. And now it's trying to maintain and maintain the level of standard that you are now. People are referring to Georgia as a standard of college football, not Alabama anymore. And that Dana Holgerson said it. You've seen it from Brian Kelly. It is a changing of the culture throughout the landscape of college football of what Kirby Smart has done. He took the blueprint from Alabama and has built it in here and has shown that he can get guys to play and work at a high level. Will it last forever? Who knows? Most likely not. But you got to continue to keep building and riding the wave as much as you can. Because right now everyone's looking at you and they're going to come hunt you down and try to beat you because you are the item you're the top of the mountain, and you've got to have one gunning at you to replace you. And that's where this is sort of set. And when it comes down to it, you've won back to back. So that puts you in a very, very rare era of can they three-peat? Nebraska won back-to-back in the 90s. They didn't three-peat. There's USC teams that won back-to-back. They didn't three-peat. Alabama won back-to-back. They didn't three-peat. You start thinking like that lines of even there's Miami teams that were absolutely amazing. They didn't three-peat. Florida State teams were really good. They never won back-to-back. Florida teams didn't win back-to-back in the heyday when they were running through. Like there are legendary teams that were dominant for periods of time that never won back-to-back, much less even won a three-peat. That's where the rare air of you're at right now as a program and the opportunity you have to really be historic. The only college football team FBS to three-peat is Minnesota, and they did it in the 30s. We're not talking Minnesota hockey. We're talking Minnesota football. That just shows you how long ago that was happening and how hard it is to three-peat. And that's the next item for Kirby and the Bulldog program to shoot for and try to achieve. You always kind of like what keeps the team hungry after you win one. What gets you to the next level to win two in a row? The 3-0 there, the three-peat. That is the next enticing moment that Kirby's going to hang over this football team and over this program of are you good enough to win three? Can you set history and become the first team I'm going to say this, first team in modern football history to win 3 straight national championships at this high level. That's something right there that you've got to force your players every single day at practice. All the recruits coming in understanding that level of expectation of where you need to work and get at. And if you don't, you're not going to get playing time, and maybe the program isn't the culture you need to be at. And that's where other teams now are going to sort of attain it. I've got to be at that level. I've got to be physical. One thing we've seen with Alabama early on, they dominated the line of scrimmage offensively and defensively. Georgia has now taken that line, and they've put it where offensive line and defensive line are priority, and they're digging through, and they're building the game from there, and then building the skill players around it. Once you're on the line of scrimmage, you change the expectation, but you change the narrative of the football game, and that's what they've done. And they're continuing to bring it in. You had Carter last year, you had Davis the year before. Who's going to be the next defensive lineman that's going to show up and and become the superstar and get paid big time in the NFL? What next linebacker is it? Jonas Dumas-Johnson? Is he going to be in there next and taking advantage of it? Who the secondary is going to be the next guy to step up? We've already seen Starks have some big time. Bullard's had a great year. Lasser's a good corner, but who's the next player? And that's how they keep also motivating each other. Who's the next one to get the big contract? Who's the next one to get drafted? But who's the next one to show up and become an All-American? And that's where you sort of keep that carrot in front of the horse, if you will, and keep that motivation factor going. When it comes to Carson Beck, he's been there forever. He could have transferred out, but he stayed. And if everyone doesn't know, Seth and I, we record from Jacksonville, Florida. Carson's from Jacksonville. He went to Mandarin High School, won a state championship at Mandarin. Nobody thought that football program was even at elite status, and they went through one of the highest levels in the state of Florida and won a national championship. So don't tell me this kid can't play football. For him to even stay there and compete and practice and show up, he has the skills. But now the lights are all on him. He doesn't come in spot time when they're up by 40 and gets to run 15, 20 plays in mop-up duty. Now you're going against the ones from the very start in the biggest environments. How are you going to respond when you go to Knoxville? How are you going to respond when you come to the cocktail party into your home city where you've been born and raised and play against the Florida Gators in your basic stadium you watch the Jaguars play with you as a starting quarterback? How are you going to respond? These are now the things that, yeah, it's great in practice, but now, Carson, the spotlight's on you. And if you're really to live up the expectations of playing at the high level, but also coming out of the shadow of Stetson Bennett and what he did, that's a huge thing. That's a lot to put on a kid. But you just need to be yourself. Don't try to be anybody else. Don't try to be Stetson. Don't try to be anybody else you might think of at a high level. You just got to be yourself and play football and play within the means of the offense. And we also talked about, you brought players coming and players going. Everyone sort of doubted the depth of the team coming into last year, and last year's team was pretty fantastic, and they were able to get it done. Don't doubt the depth that this team has this year, because if you do, you're going to end up with a loss on your schedule when you play the Dogs. You've got to come in and attack them and respect them from the very beginning, and I think they're going to respect you. You respect them and understand that there might be a guy you've never heard of on that depth chart who's going to pop up one day and become an NFL player, just like they would at any players at Ohio State or Michigan or Alabama. These guys are now factories of football players that are coming at an elite level, and they're going to bring it a high. And I expect this team they're going to run out there. They're going to play a bunch of guys. The schedule is not very tough. Oklahoma was removed on it because they're moving to the league. The SEC took them off, which it makes the schedule look a lot less and a lot more, simple, as a lack of a better term. This team should be undefeated going to Knoxville, and there's no way around that factor. Georgia should be undefeated going to Knoxville unless there are some serious injuries that do pop up. You never want to see that. But this team has so much talent. Now, you brought up Monken leaving. Mike Bobo was the offensive coordinator at Georgia for a long time. Aaron Murray is one of the top 20 career passing yard leaders in the NCAA football record books, and he was the quarterback for Mike Bobo. Bobo last year was on the staff. Obviously, him and Monken worked on a lot of different plays, and there's a bunch of them that he actually drew up and suggested to Monken, and Monken called. They're going to play within Kirby's system. Jamar Chaney, John Chaney was there, and when he didn't do exactly what Kirby wanted, there's a reason why he left. There's a reason why Coley, who came in after that and left, they didn't play within the constraints and the structure of Kirby Smart, what he wanted to do. Monken, him and they were able to work together, figure out what they wanted to do, bring the offensive along. I think Bobo will do just fine. He will have his own wrinkle to it. There are things that he loves and prefers over other different styles of offense, but Kirby's going to reel him in if he has to, and Kirby's going to let him coach freely if he has to. It's going to depend on that. I expect the 2 years under now, with Beck and him working together, they'll be okay. I will watch out. If there's any issues, Gunnar Stockton will take over and become the new backup quarterback, will become the starter. He has special talent. Kid can run. Rail is obviously not there yet, but there is depth. If there's any hint of issues, they will pull the trigger on Beck and play another quarterback, because you saw it in 2021. JT Daniels was hurt, but JT Daniels maybe didn't have the full vibe of the team. Stetson had the vibe of the team. They ran with him. The betterment of the team is what's most important. If you aren't cutting it at any position, that includes the quarterback, Kirby won't play you. So do not feel like it's an entitlement that Carson Beck is the guy the entire time, because it's all about winning a national championship and an SEC championship for Georgia. They don't care. They're not going to stick with a guy just because he's been there. You're going to have to prove you can play every single time. And I think that's a huge testament to the entire team of no position is safe. And that should be another, if you're building a program, you should still let, no matter who you are, no position is safe, because the standard of winning is a team game. And if that person's holding it back and there's a player who can maybe make a difference behind them, that player should be playing, because the team victory or loss is more important than individual success. And I think that's where you build a strong program culture of keeping everybody on alert. And that's what Kirby has done. I think Carson Beck should understand that. Don't play scared, but understand if you're the weak link in the offense, you will be benched, because you have to owe it to your teammates and being accountable that way. I think expect to watch that battle play out the entire season of, is he holding up his end of the bargain? Is he actually playing at a high standard? Or if he does struggle, does Kirby pull the trigger on it and maybe play somebody else just to get a different flow in there and see how they respond? The schedule, like you said, I'm not worried about it. You have to be aware, and every single game is going to be tough. You got to be able to focus and play. But the schedule starts. Ole Miss is going to be a big test, but going to Knoxville, can you go back in there? We've been a lot of chirping from volunteer fans the past 2 years, especially going into Athens last year. They're going to be hungry. They want to win. Tennessee knows they have to beat Georgia to set the standard and surpass them and get where they want to go. So we'll see that game there late November, how that turns out. Will Georgia continue to dominate the SEC East and maybe get back to Atlanta? Or will Tennessee be able to take over a team that has maybe some more youth on it and not exactly ready for that road test? That's going to be the big time game. If they get it, they're going to be playing for an SEC championship game. Most likely going to have a good chance of winning the SEC, going to the college football playoff. That Tennessee game, if you don't go in undefeated, there's bigger issues, and it's going to be a big developmental year. But they should be undefeated going to Knoxville in late November. From there, we let the chips fall where they may. I think the ceiling for this team obviously is undefeated, 12-0 regular season. The floor, 10-2. I don't think this team has too much talent, too much organization, too much accountability not to lose more than 2 games. But Losses can happen. Things can happen. That's why you play the football games. That's every play counts, and they are inches away, feet away, from losing to Ohio State last year. There's a matter of details, and only 5 or 6 plays a game determine if you win or lose. And if they're excellent in every single one of those facets, they win. If you mess up on a couple plays that cost you, that might cost you a national championship opportunity. So, got to be detailed, got to be coached up, be accountable. But I think this team is in a very, very good spot. Kirby has them in a great spot. Ceiling 12-0 regular season, floor is 10-2.
Who are the two? If you look at the schedule and say, who are the two teams that you feel? Let me ask you this, Fresh, because I'm looking at it, and again, I don't know how I'm being the more pounding the pavement. Which two teams that you would say have at least have the horses to keep up offensively and defensively with Georgia? I'll give you Tennessee. Who's the other team?
There was a couple of years ago. You can't point a team out because there could be something where the day is just bad. A couple of years ago, South Carolina under Will Muschamp went to Athens and beat Georgia. Last year, Missouri should have beaten Georgia if they were able to close out in the fourth quarter. You've got to survive, and if they have the fortitude to prevail in the fourth quarter, they win. If they don't, they lose. You've got to be perfect every football game, and that's where the complacency thing comes into play. Kirby talked about it. Complacency is my biggest fear. Guys think that, we've done it. We're just going to walk in and the game's just going to happen to us. That's where you start losing. Ole Miss has actually beaten Nick Saban and the good Nick Saban teams twice because the guy's like, it's just Ole Miss, and they go in there and they beat him. Not under Lane Kiffin though, but they found ways to get it done. How do you think Jimbo Fisher was able to get a win, or Johnny Manziel going in Tuscaloosa? No one it's Johnny Manziel, runs around, beats Alabama, a very good Alabama football team. It's games where either you play a team that just gets on a run and gets hot, or you play just a clunker of a football game. The other guys just have a great afternoon. It's sometimes those are the games where you get up for the Tennessee game. You get up for the Florida game because of the cocktail party. But it's the other ones where you don't have the focus, like going to Mizzou last year. You came like, we're going to go to Missouri. We're going to beat the trash out of the Tigers. And before you know it, you're in a battle. And if you don't have that team mentality to hold it down and get it done in the second half, you lose that football game. Everything's down the drain at that point. It's those kind of games where they catch you, and it could happen.
It can always happen. I can also wake up tomorrow and be 6'3" and a $185.
Well, now you're talking crazy.
I really am. Actually, technically, I could win the lottery tonight. Like, there's all sorts of things that could happen. But I'm looking at this, and that's the hard thing for me to go back. And again, I might stretch and say Ole Miss. Ole Miss does have some talent. We saw some good football out of Ole Miss and Tennessee, but really, this is a very, very easy schedule. This is almost, I would dare to call it a bakery type of schedule because of how many what I would feel are cupcakes on it. And even if there wasn't that many cupcakes on it, and again, I get the whole we lost Oklahoma and that would make it look better. And you're right on that part. It's not your fault that Auburn sucks. It's not your fault that Kentucky is going to take us. Devin Leary with Kentucky is going to be good, but they're going to take it. They're going to take a step back there. Florida, Billy Napier still got a year away before they could even really be talking about this. I don't think you take Missouri lightly ever again. That game's in Athens. You get Ole Miss in Athens there, okay. But it really, again, that's November 18th game. I'm going to say this. If Georgia loses a regular season game, I'm going to say that they should be kept out of the playoff. And that reason being is because of that's how talented they are. They shouldn't be this. Fresh, let me talk to you first.
No, you bring they might only play, 2 ranked teams all year?
Right.
That's in all honest opinion, I don't think South Carolina will be ranked at that point of the year. They may not, but if they lose to North Carolina, they won't. I don't see Auburn being ranked in late September. I highly doubt Florida will be ranked come the cocktail party. Ole Miss may be ranked, but they're going to probably beat it by the time November comes. So Tennessee is the only team you might actually truly guarantee to be ranked when they play in the regular season.
If Kentucky can really put the boots to Florida at the end of September, that September or the October 7th game, Kentucky could, if they're coming in 4-0 and or 5-0, and they beat up on Florida the week before. I think Kentucky could probably be ranked, maybe. But let's take a look at, I talked about Monken versus Bobo. You take a look at some of the things with Mike Bobo, and you look at Aaron Murray is a great example. Aaron Murray's entire career was under Mike Bobo as his offensive coordinator. All-time leading Georgia passer, 13,000 yards, 121 touchdowns, 41 interceptions. That's going to have to be the story for Carson Beck. Like, Stetson Bennett never lost you the game. He never made a mistake that loses you the football game. I don't necessarily want to say that he single-handedly won a game, but he was never the reason to lose a game. That's got to be the question. Can Carson Beck do that? I think that he's going to have plenty of time to get used to this offense. I think he's going to have plenty of time to work out the kinks. I think that he's going to have plenty of time to really get used to the wide receivers. Who's going to step up? McConkley is a great wide receiver there. He's one of those guys that you wish he was on your team, but hate that he's on the other team type of player, sport hate type of guy. But Fresh, I'm going to give you some statistics here. Do you know that how many by week one, how many days would have passed by then? So that's September 2nd. How many days would have passed since Georgia last lost a regular season game?
Oh, they didn't lose one on 21, so it had been 2020.
Yep.
And that would have been Florida.
It was the cocktail party.
Yep. So, yeah, that was the last regular season loss.
November 7th, 2020. By week 1,029 days have passed since Georgia has last lost a regular season football game. And that's week 1.
These are the good times.
Now listen, let me put some of this in context here, okay? These are the good times. And hear this. UCLA's undefeated run lasted 1,092 days and arguably considered one of the greatest basketball runs in sports. Now, again, they play a lot more. They play not 80, I think the 80-plus win game streak there. Play a lot more games. Okay, I'll give you that one. Hulk Hogan was WWF champion for 1,474 days. If Georgia wins a third national, if Georgia does not lose a regular season game, and again, you corrected me last record, I'm not counting the SEC or title game. I'm talking regular season, 12 games. You would meet Hulk Hogan's record to start next season, depending on whatever happens in there. Cal Ripken Jr. played 2,362 games in a row. So this kind of gives you some context of where Georgia's starting off the season in between regular season losses. This is a remarkable team, Fresh. They are built to win. They're going to be very, very tough. You're going to have to be playing on your A game. I don't see a team on here that really is going to give them a lot of fits until the end of November. We'll know what Georgia is. The question is the SEC title game and then playoffs, because that is now level of expectation. And good for Georgia fans, because you take a look at those things. And when I was looking at Mike Bobo, when he was in Georgia from 07 to 13. And I'm not going to go over those years because there's a quarterback in 2009 by the name of Joe Cox, rough year. And then the 2010 year, too, is real rough for Georgia. I didn't want to go through that on that piece, but you take a look and say it kind of gives you some context of how great this is. Yeah.
Yeah, quarterback stability is something that I think is it ebbed and flowed back in the day, but I think it's still something that Georgia fans are getting used to, that having a consistent quarterback positioning strength is because there were some tough years there for a while.